Will FSU's defense be good enough, or will they be just plain good? Last season's defense was like one of those holographic pictures from the 90s. The image itself changed when you changed your perspective on it. From one lens, you could justify this as a top 15 defense. They were the 14th best team in terms of yards per play and limited explosives at an elite rate, which may be the best single stat at predicting defensive success. But from another angle, there were some significant questions. Most advanced metrics landed them somewhere around the range of 30 to 40th best defense, and the stat that probably paid into that the most was success rate. FSU finished 60th in that category, and that lack of success was mainly on the ground. Most of that can be explained by how FSU schemes up their defense. For the most part, FSU preferred to keep what I call a light box. This means that when they're facing a standard formation, in this case an 11 personnel grouping with one tight end and one running back, FSU usually only had 6 men close to the line of scrimmage between the tackles. A quick way to count these numbers is to look at the safeties. If they have 2 back, they're lightly light in the box. This creates obvious problems for the defense from a purely numerical perspective. They simply don't have enough players to take on all of the blockers and still have one guy left over to tackle the ball carrier. So why might a team do this? Firstly, if you didn't do this, it would essentially force you to give one-on-ones to the outside, since this central safety couldn't help with both outside receivers. Secondly, allowed them to cover up their corners, which was arguably their weakest position group last season. They do this primarily with different types of what's called man-match cover 4. Essentially, it plays just like cover 4, but instead of covering grass like you'd see in a country zone, they wait for receivers to declare and man up on the routes. Theoretically, this gives them the best of both worlds. They don't have big gaps like you'd see in a zone, but it's much less predictable than man, and it's harder for an offense to run pick plays. The biggest downside is the learning curve. Now that they're in the 4th year at FSU, that really shouldn't be an issue. And finally, they seem to put an emphasis on stopping explosives. How do those happen? Well, mostly through the air. In fact, passing plays just tend to be more efficient at moving the ball in general compared to running plays. So it makes sense to take a guy out of the box, replace him with another coverage specialist, and stop the pass. This is such a good idea that FSU tends to find itself an elite company in terms of light box usage. I know what you're asking. If this is such a great idea, then why wasn't FSU's defense better? Well, to be frank, they were really good against teams where they could get away with this. When they could rely on the front 6 to stop the run, teams generally couldn't throw into coverage that was stacked with an extra guy. But things looked a bit different against good offenses. Teams that could find success running the football tended to give FSU fits. This was exacerbated when the linchpin of FSU's defensive line, Fabian Lovett, went down with an injury before FSU's toughest slate of games. So how do you ensure that that doesn't happen again? Well, the simplest solution is just to get more linchpins. Transfer Braden Fiske has looked downright unstoppable in fall camp, and a few young guys like Josh Farmer and Daniel Lyons have come a long way in development. Another solution is to improve the corner play. If you could truly trust your corners on islands on the outside, it allows the defense to occasionally shift an extra man in the box to help with run fits. FSU also tried to answer that problem through the portal, with the addition of all ACC caliber cornerback Fentrell Cypress. This will allow FSU to hunt for the best matchups as he sits opposite the physical and reliable Renardo Green, who's coming off a good season himself. But ultimately, I think they're going to stick to their strategy from last year. In addition to their improved defensive line, they have 2 savvy and honestly underrated linebackers in Kalen, Deloach, and Tatum Bethune to help them plug up any gaps on the interior. Plus, there are still some question marks in the secondary. They have to replace their do-it-all safety Jamie Robinson, and while there are some known commodities in Shaheem Brown and Akeem Dent, the depth behind them is talented but not battle-tested. Oh, and I almost forgot. They really won't need to blitz much to generate pressure anyways. They'll have the twitchy Patrick Payton, who was good enough to win the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year last season, as their second best defensive end. And as for their best end, well, I think he speaks for himself. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I put a full transcript over on Noles 247, so help me continue the conversation over there. Next week, hopefully I'll have an LSU preview and we'll get right into the season. I'm excited. Thanks for watching.